Three young women stood outside a mill and posed for a photograph in 1912, giving it little thought at the time. 100 years later, however, scientists zoomed in on the image and uncovered a disturbing detail that left them shocked. Inside the port mill, the constant roar of machines filled the air, while thick cotton lint floated everywhere in the badly ventilated room. Pearl Turner adjusted her dress and held her posture straight. The photographer had asked them to step outside briefly. "Hurry up, Pearlie," her older sister Viola said, smoothing her plain dress. "Mr. Himmel told us we can't leave our stations for long." "I'm coming," Pearl answered, trying not to cough as they moved into the rare fresh air. At just 9 years old, and soon to turn 10 in a few months, Pearl had already spent 3 years working in the mill. Her small fingers had quickly learned the risky technique needed to run the spinning machines. The man with the camera, Thomas Himmel, placed the girls in front of the mill's accounting office. Pearl stood on the left, her dark eyes showing a seriousness far beyond her age, her face calm but heavy. Viola, 14, already looked worn down, as if exhaustion lived deep in her bones, and she stood on the right. Between them was Penelope, a 12-year-old neighbor who worked on the same floor. "Hold still now," Mr. Himmel said as he ducked under the black cloth covering his camera. A moment later, air was a flash, and the girls were captured forever. 3 young, stiff faces framed against the grim workplace that stole their childhood hours. None of them could have imagined that this single photograph would survive more than a century and, when rediscovered, would reveal something scientifically startling. Pearl glanced once more at the man with the camera before following her sister back. Into the mill, into the endless noise and drifting lint that would soon bring terrible consequences. More than 100 years later, Professor Sonia Abernathy looked up from her computer to find her research assistant, Marcus, standing in the doorway holding a manila folder, his face lit with excitement. "What did you find?" she asked, removing her glasses. Marcus stepped forward and opened the folder. "It's from the Thomas Himmel collection we've been digitizing. This photo is from 1912, 3 mill girls in Gastonia." Sonia studied the image, seeing 3 young girls with stiff expressions standing in front of what looked like an office. "So," she asked, "we've seen hundreds of Himmel's child labor photos. Look closer," Marcus said, pointing to the girl on the left. "According to Himmel's notes, this is Pearl Turner. She wasn't even 10 yet and had already worked in the mill for 3 years. But that's not the strange part." He pulled out another paper. "I found her obituary. She lived until 1964. That's very rare for mill workers from that time, especially ones who started so young. And there's more. We have interview records with her children from 2006 and 2007. Sonia leaned forward, her interest clearly sparked. By day she was a professor, and in her spare time an archivist, spending her life organizing pieces of the past. Recently, she had been researching the dark history of child labor, a subject that weighed heavily on her, though she forced herself to stay focused. Marcus, on the other hand, was full of energy, often noticing small details but rarely pushing for deeper research unless it truly mattered. This case clearly mattered to him. "Can we run facial recognition software on the image?" Marcus asked eagerly. "If we enhance it, it could really help our research. I've already written the request letter. I just need your approval." Sonia thought for a moment, then gave a short nod. Marcus's unusual excitement stirred something in her, a quiet hope that they were standing on the edge of an important discovery, even though she didn't yet know how true that would be. 3 weeks later, Sonia sat staring at her screen, comparing the enhanced photo with articles and images from the Himmel database. When nothing useful appeared, she expanded her search to weaving archives and old medical journals. Marcus had done most of the field work, tracking down and interviewing anyone connected to the photo. At first, their goal was to learn more about Penelope, since she was the only girl without a clear record. But as they continued, their attention slowly shifted toward Pearl, the youngest. Something about her story felt unusual. Sonia zoomed in on Pearl's face, studying every detail. She examined her skin, features, hair, and posture under the seppi. Tones, comparing them with notes from medical journals spread across her desk. After 2 long days, she finally found something. The university's advanced imaging system revealed a detail in the original photo that no one had noticed for over a century. Her heart began to race as she understood what it meant. This changes everything we thought we knew about the health of textile mill workers. She whispered, reaching for her phone. "Get me Dr. Harold from the medical history department." That evening, Sonia stood before a room full of professors and historians, many from the medical history field. Behind her, projected on a massive screen, was the enhanced 1912 photograph by Thomas Himmel. "Good evening," she began. "What you're seeing may be one of the most important historical medical findings of the decade. These 3 young girls were photographed outside the port mill in Gastonia, North Carolina, in 1912. Like thousands of children at that time, they worked long hours in dangerous conditions, breathing in cotton fibers that usually caused serious lung disease and early death." She clicked to the next slide, zooming in on Pearl Turner's face. The audience leaned closer. Try ING to catch the subtle details. Using advanced imaging methods designed for art restoration, we examined this photo in ways never done before. What we discovered in the facial structure and skin markings of this 9-year-old girl suggests she had a previously unknown genetic variation. Quiet gasps moved through the room. Professor Lawson, a respected geneticist, shook his head in disbelief but stayed silent as Sonia continued. Records show Pearl Turner lived to age 66, which was highly unusual for someone who began mill work at 6 or 7. "Her sister Viola," she said, pointing to the girl on the right, "died of tuberculosis just 4 years after this photo was taken. At age 17, 4 of their 8 siblings also died before reaching 20. This difference within the same family raised serious questions." She moved to another slide showing medical diagrams. "I believe Pearl Turner had a rare genetic variation that made her lungs more resistant to damage from textile particles. My theory is that she carried a variant of the MC1R gene, which is usually linked to skin tone and other genetic traits." Sonia strengthened her argument by drawing attention to the difference in skin tone between the 2 sisters in the photograph. At first look, someone might assume Pearl had Hindu roots because of her darker skin and highlights, but Professor Abernathy explained that this was not the case. Beyond changes in skin and eye color, research shows that some people with certain MC1R variants also have a naturally lower sensitivity to pain. She said calmly, trying to make her point clear. "Notice these small facial signs, the slightly broader nasal structure, and the uncommon eye fold pattern. These features suggest what we now believe was an adaptive trait that developed in response to harsh industrial environments. We don't fully understand how, but Pearl's genes were somehow prepared to handle the damage caused by mill work." Mark Us then greeted the audience and added his thoughts. Although this was only one recorded case, the professor believed it opened the door to a powerful idea, that humans may have adapted to industrial conditions far faster than scientists once believed. This small gathering was only the first step. Even though the discovery left them amazed, the scientists searched for more evidence that could support their work. Along this journey, they unexpectedly uncovered even more startling truths. Within a few months, Sonia found herself standing at the door of Rachel Horton, Pearl Turner's daughter, now in her 70s. The elderly woman welcomed her into a simple living room filled with family photos from many generations. Rachel held the enhanced image of her mother as a child with shaky hands. "Mama never knew why she lived longer than all her siblings," she said softly. "She used to say she was just stubborn." Sonia smiled gently. "Stubborn, yes, but also special in ways she never knew. Your mother's body handled mill conditions in a unique way that we are only now beginning to understand." Rachel softly touched the photograph. Looking back brought mixed emotions. She shared memories of her childhood, at least what she could recall. Pearl Turner married her father, Frank Jenkins, at the age of 19. Both were laborers and their lives revolved around the mill. When her first daughter, Sarah, was born, Pearl left mill work. 3 years later, Rachel was born, completing their family of 4. As children, the girls never lacked basic needs. Their home and schooling were supported by the mill owners. Everyone knew each other in their close neighborhood. Rachel described a deep bond among neighbors, saying people shared what they had with those in need without expecting anything back. Life felt simple and warm then. Still, hardships existed, especially for Pearl, who often struggled with breathing issues. Rachel grew up watching her mother's ongoing health problems. While her father continued working at the mill, Pearl stayed home, spending time chatting with friends and knitting clothes for Sarah and Rachel. It was painful to watch. Rachel admitted she knew very little about her mother's family. Her father's side was well known, but her mother's past was filled with sorrow and silence. Almost everyone on Pearl's side had died before Rachel was born. Pearl's father died after a long battle with gout, and her mother suffered a fatal stroke only weeks later. Sarah was just 2 years old at the time. Like her grandparents, distant relatives on Pearl's side were lost, married away, or already gone. Rachel always believed these tragedies were the result of the harsh industrial life of the past. But Sonia had surprising news. Rachel's mother's genes were unusually strong, almost like a superhero's, especially in how they repaired damage. Rachel looked again at the photo of Pearl she had never seen before. Even faded, she could clearly recognize her mother's small face. Thinking about how that little girl had learned to work dangerous machines at such a young age filled her with sadness. Exposure to those harsh conditions had hurt the family for generations. Her heart ached. She struggled with breathing her whole life, Rachel said, but unlike her siblings, she survived. That's what makes her so remarkable, Sonia replied. Despite lung damage, her body had special repair systems others didn't. We believe she passed some of these traits on to you and your sister, Sarah. Rachel looked up. Sarah had died in 2008. She suffered from asthma her entire life but lived to 82. Amazing, Sonia whispered, writing notes. And you? I've had my health struggles, Rachel said, but I'm still here. With Rachel's consent, Sonia's team collected DNA samples and compared them with medical histories from other mill worker families. The results went beyond their expectations. Back at the university lab, scientists spent long hours studying tissue samples. Just as Sonia predicted, genetic markers in Rachel's DNA confirmed their theory. It was a genetic adaptation that allowed stronger lung repair and protection against harmful particles. And all because we zoomed in on a photograph over 100 years old, Marcus said in awe. If Thomas Himmel hadn't taken that picture, those girls would have been forgotten. Instead, Sonia added, they've given us insight into human adaptation that may help treat lung diseases caused by dangerous work. As the findings spread, interest grew across science and medical departments. By fall, Sonia stood before a full auditorium at a historical epidemiology conference in Boston. The discovery even changed the old port mill itself. Now turned into luxury apartments, it included a small museum about its industrial past. At the center stood a large print of the Himmel photograph, along with the story behind it. Visitors gathered as guides explained its importance. Soon, scientists everywhere spoke of Pearl Turner, the young girl with a genetic variation that allowed her to survive conditions that killed many others, including her own sister. By 2015, Sonia's research moved from history into medical breakthrough. At a medical research conference in Atlanta, she introduced what they named the Turner adaptation, a genetic variation that improves lung cell repair after exposure to harmful particles. The discovery had already led to 2 experimental treatments for occupational lung disease, both showing strong promise. Some critics argued the team focused too much on a single case. Sonia ignored the doubt. To her, science often began with one unusual detail that challenged expectations. Pearl Turner lived while her siblings died young. That difference demanded answers. When questioned by an inquiry panel, Sonia explained that similar genetic markers were now found in descendants of other industrial workers from the region, confirming their early conclusions. I don't believe we exaggerated this case, she said firmly. By 2022, clinical trials were complete, and the first treatment based on the Turner adaptation was approved for public use. Medical journals featured the news as the start of a new chapter in treating occupational lung disease. Beneath the headlines was the same old photograph by Thomas Himmel, showing 3 serious young girls standing before a building, their futures unknown. Sonia learned a lasting lesson from it all. Behind every historical image and statistic about child labor were real children, with real bodies struggling to survive. Some, like Viola Turner, could not adapt in time. Others, like Pearl, found a way without ever knowing it. What do you think about Pearl's painful story and her contribution to science? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.